The station was alive with noise, shoes clattering on the marble floor, hurried voices bleeding into one another, the echo of train whistles fading into the ceiling. Yet, in the chaos, she stood still. One hand clutched the strap of a worn leather bag, the other buried deep in her coat pocket, fingers wrapped around the cold frame of a cracked silver watch. Her gaze didn't move with the rushing crowd, it stayed fixed on a single departure board, as if the flickering letters carried answers only she could read. The wind from an opening door brushed strands of hair across her face, and still, she didn't blink. Beneath the fluorescent lights, her lips trembled like a secret pressing against them. A memory tried to surface, the sting of a voice, sharp and unforgettable, "You'll never graduate." The words weren't shouted, yet they rang louder than the station's announcements. Her chest rose, heavy. She pressed the watch tighter in her palm, the fractured glass leaving faint lines against her skin. That watch had belonged to her father. It ticked unevenly, like a heart carrying too many scars, but she wore it anyway. She always did when she needed courage. Around her, strangers brushed past. A man dragging a suitcase muttered apologies, a child laughed somewhere near the ticket counter, a woman's perfume lingered in the air. But to her, it all blurred into background noise. She was listening for something else. Her eyes flicked to the exit doors, where glass reflected a world she was not sure she belonged to anymore. Somewhere out there, past steel tracks and cities she had never touched, waited the very stage where her silence would end. She drew a breath, unsteady. The cracked watch ticked once, twice, then seemed to pause. She glanced down at it as though it could give her permission to move. "Do I belong here?" the thought brushed against her mind, uninvited. Her hand tightened around the strap of her bag until her knuckles whitened. The loudspeaker cracked alive, announcing a train's arrival. People surged forward, their coats and scarves fluttering like restless wings. She didn't move with them. She only lowered her head slightly, watching her reflection in the polished floor. Her own eyes looked back at her, tired, but burning with something quiet. Something sharp. Her lips parted. Just a whisper, not for anyone else, "Wait for me." The sound disappeared into the station's roar. And yet, her fingers, still wrapped around the broken watch, felt steady for the first time. But then a shadow fell across her shoulder. Someone stopped behind her. Close enough to listen. She didn't turn. Not yet. The shadow lingered behind her, stretching across the station floor, merging with the others, but heavier, sharper. She didn't turn. Instead, her fingers brushed once more over the cracked silver watch, its uneven ticks echoing louder in her mind than the station's endless noise. "Keep it with you, always. When the world tries to rush you, let it remind you, time bends for no one, but courage can slow it down." Her father's voice came back like smoke, warm but fleeting. She had been a child then, sitting cross-legged on the floor while he knelt, fastening the watch onto her small wrist. The strap had been too big, sliding around her arm like it didn't belong. Just like she had often felt. Now, years later, the leather was worn to softness, edges frayed. The watch ticked unevenly, but it was hers. The only piece of him she had left. A loud laugh broke the memory. Across the station, she noticed a woman rushing into the arms of a man, suitcase tumbling against their feet as they kissed like time had stopped just for them. A little boy threw himself into his grandfather's embrace, clinging so tightly the old man's hat nearly slipped off. Her throat tightened. She gripped her bag closer to her chest, its weight pulling at her shoulder. Inside were only essentials, a notebook filled with scribbled plans, a few clothes, the envelope of money she had saved from months of working double shifts at the cafe. All she owned, all she could carry. She looked away quickly, afraid of envying strangers. The shadow behind her shifted but said nothing. His silence pressed against her back, not invasive, but deliberate. It was as though he wasn't waiting to speak, but waiting for her to. Her stomach knotted. She remembered late nights, books spread across her small rented room, her hands shaking from too much coffee, too little food. She remembered the girl at school, her voice dripping with certainty, "You'll never graduate. People like you don't make it." Those words had stitched themselves into her chest, heavy as chains. But tonight, if she could make it onto that train, if she could step into that hall, she would prove them wrong. Not just to her. To herself. Still, her feet stayed rooted to the marble floor. The departure board flickered again, train delayed. She exhaled, long and shaky. A delay. Time forcing her to wait when she wanted to run. The cracked watch on her wrist seemed to laugh at her, ticking in its crooked rhythm. Then she felt it, the faintest shift of air, the stranger behind her moving closer. Not touching. Just close enough that she could almost hear the weight of his breath. Her hand tightened around the strap of her bag. She turned her head slightly, lips parting as though to speak, but stopped. Instead, a confused half-smile ghosted across her face, uncertain if it was meant for him, or for the trembling reflection staring back from the station floor. The station lights flickered once, a tremor running through the hall as if even the building felt the weight of waiting. She tilted her head, only slightly, and caught a glimpse of the stranger behind her. He wasn't much older, but his presence felt heavier, like he carried more years than his face admitted. His coat was too thin for the season, rain-speckled at the shoulders. His shoes, worn at the edges, soles almost undone, suggested long roads walked without rest. And tucked halfway into the frayed pocket of his bag, a photograph. Its corner curled, its image hidden, but she recognized the fragility of something carried too long, too close. Her eyes returned to the cracked watch on her wrist, and a strange ache bloomed. For the first time, she wondered if her loneliness wasn't hers alone. Thunder rumbled distantly. The glass doors rattled with the start of rain, droplets streaking down like hurried tears. People rushed toward the exits, umbrellas opening like dark flowers, voices rising. The air inside grew damp, smelling faintly of wet stone and iron. She inhaled, slow and shaky. The train, still delayed. Her heart whispered, "Leave. You've come too far to hesitate." But another voice, quieter, older, echoed beneath it, "Not every shadow follows to harm you." The stranger didn't step forward, didn't speak. Yet in his stillness, she sensed something more intentional than silence. She studied his hands, resting loosely at his sides, fingers calloused, nails short. Not idle hands. Working hands. Scarred by something he didn't name. And suddenly she saw it, herself, mirrored. The same hunger hidden under quietness, the same refusal to beg for pity, the same silence that wasn't weakness but armor. Her throat tightened. She wanted to ask, "Who broke you? What did you lose?" But she didn't. Instead, her fingers traced the strap of her bag again, digging into leather like it could anchor her. Her pulse thudded in uneven time with the cracked watch. Outside, the storm grew. Lightning flashed across the glass, reflecting both their faces for a split second, her eyes searching, his unreadable, shadows cut sharp across his cheekbones. She almost spoke. But the words curdled on her tongue. A choice pressed against her ribs: step onto the train and leave him as a ghost in this station, or stay, let the delay turn into a detour, let silence bind her to a stranger who looked too much like her own reflection. Her chest ached. Was this fate's hand, or another test meant to break her? The announcement board flickered again, light scattering across the marble floor. She turned, at last, to meet his gaze. And in that charged silence, neither of them smiled. Neither of them looked away. Unanswered. The storm outside beat harder against the glass, its rhythm drowning the station's usual order. Umbrellas shook dry in the corners, heels tapped impatiently, announcements sputtered through static. Yet all she could hear was the uneven tick of her cracked watch. Her legs moved before she decided, one step back, then another, bag pressed tight to her side. She told herself, go. Leave now. This silence isn't yours to carry. But halfway toward the exit, she faltered. Something, weightless yet unbearable, pulled her. She turned, almost reluctantly, for one last look. The stranger was still there. Still watching. But now, in his hand, glinted something familiar. Her breath caught. The watch. She hadn't even felt it slip from her wrist, the loose strap undone in her hurried steps. Yet there it was, cradled in his rough palm, the fractured glass catching lightning in the distance. He wasn't gripping it tightly, just holding it like a fragile truth. For a heartbeat, the crowd seemed to hush around them. Only her pulse roared. She wanted to snatch it back, to reclaim the only piece of her father left, but her feet didn't move. Instead, her eyes fixed on his. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost drowned in thunder. Some people carry more than just bags. His gaze flicked briefly to her chest, where her hands clenched the strap. They carry silence. The words stung. Not because they were unkind, but because they were true. A pair of women walking past glanced at them, whispering. One raised an eyebrow, eyes flicking between the girl and the stranger as though already writing a story of their own. Nearby, a man coughed sharply, muttering something about drifters under his breath. Judgment slid easily through the air, uninvited but ever present. Her chest tightened with shame, with defiance. She wanted to scream that they didn't know her, didn't know him. But her voice stayed buried, trembling against her ribs. The watch ticked once in his palm, uneven and defiant. He lifted it slightly, as though offering it back, though his hand didn't close the distance. Her throat burned. If she reached out now, it would not just be for the watch, it would be for something more dangerous. The storm cracked again. Lightning lit the station windows, throwing their shadows across the floor. Two silhouettes. Two mirrors of each other, bound by silence heavier than words. Her hand twitched at her side. But she didn't move. And he didn't either. The moment stretched, fragile, unbroken, balanced on the thin glass of a watch between them. Unresolved. The watch ticked unevenly in his palm, as if marking not just time but choice. She hesitated, hand hovering between reaching for it and retreating. The stranger's eyes, shadowed yet unwavering, didn't let her slip away. Then, without a word, he extended the watch toward her. She stepped closer, heart hammering. Her fingers brushed the cool metal as she took it back, yet in that fleeting touch, something else slipped between them. A folded card. She didn't notice until she'd already pulled the watch to her chest. The card, creased from years of wear, fell into her palm. On it, embossed in faded gold, was the name of a company. The same one she had circled in her notebook 100 times, the place she had dared to send her desperate application only weeks ago. Her stomach knotted. She looked up. His expression didn't shift, but his silence deepened into something heavier than before. And then she saw it, the photo tucked in his bag, now revealed by the tilt of his movement. A girl. Young, bright-eyed, hair tied back with a red scarf. The very same scarf she had once borrowed from a friend and lost years ago, the day she'd been told she would never graduate. Her breath cracked in her throat. The stranger closed his bag slowly, as if shielding the photo from her gaze. Yet she had seen enough. The cracked watch in her hands suddenly felt heavier, alive with a weight that wasn't just hers. Time bends for no one, but courage can slow it down. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. But this time, the words no longer belonged only to him. They pulsed like a thread between past and present, between her watch and his photograph. Between her silence and his. The storm outside rattled the station doors again, thunder rolling like the sound of something breaking open. Around her, the world carried on, announcements, reunions, whispers, but she felt the ground tilt. If he was who she thought, if this card meant what she feared, then she wasn't standing in front of a stranger. She was standing in front of the gatekeeper of the very future she had fought for. Her pulse thudded harder, uneven like the watch itself. This wasn't chance. This was a point she could not turn back from. He didn't say it, but his silence demanded, "What will you do now?" She swallowed hard, tucking the card into her bag. And then, almost without thinking, she turned toward the glowing sign above the waiting hall, the room where interviews were being held, the room where names would be called. She walked toward it. Each step was a decision. The interview hall was nothing like the station outside, quiet, dimly lit, its air thick with expectation. Rows of chairs lined the walls, names were called one by one, footsteps echoing against the polished floor. She stood at the threshold, bag at her side, the cracked watch cool against her palm. Her chest rose and fell unevenly. She hadn't planned for this, hadn't imagined the man behind her shadow would step into the same room. Yet when she turned, there he was. Coat dripping rain, shoes leaving faint prints, eyes fixed not on the papers in his hand, but on her. The board announced the next name. Not hers. Still, the silence between them demanded something more pressing than any interview. He approached slowly, setting his bag down with care. For the first time, his voice carried weight enough to still the room. "You hold on to silence like it's a shield." His gaze flicked to the cracked watch. "But shields can also keep life out." Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to say he knew nothing of her struggles, but she saw the photograph again in her mind, the girl with the red scarf. And suddenly she knew, this wasn't about her alone. "You lost her," she whispered, words trembling. He didn't flinch. Just nodded once, slow, like the truth had no energy left to fight. "And you remind me, too much." The weight of it pressed into her chest, not as flattery but as burden. She wasn't chosen because she was her. She was chosen because she was a mirror of someone gone. The watch ticked unevenly in her hand, louder than her pulse. She thought of her father fastening it on her wrist, of his words, "Time bends for no one, but courage can slow it down." Courage, she realized, was not just stepping forward. Sometimes it was letting go. She unfastened the strap. For the first time, her wrist felt bare, almost weightless. Carefully, she placed the watch in his open palm. His brows furrowed. "Why?" "Because it was never meant to keep me chained to the past," she said softly. "And maybe, it belongs with someone who knows what silence costs." Around them, voices murmured, other candidates, staff, whispers like judgment. But for once, she didn't shrink beneath them. She lifted her chin, spine straight, the faintest fire in her eyes. The storm outside had begun to ease. The windows reflected her now not as a bystander, but as someone walking into her own story. The board flickered again. This time, her name. She took one last look at him, the watch cradled in his hand like something both broken and holy. And then she turned, stepping toward the room, each stride no longer hesitation, but choice. Her silence had cracked open. Not into noise, but into strength. Somewhere behind her, she thought she heard him exhale. A sound like release. Not every stranger you help is meant to stay, but some leave you changed forever. Step was everything. The rain had stopped by the time she stepped out of the hall. The station, once alive with rushing footsteps and voices, now carried only the hush that follows a storm. Puddles shimmered beneath the flickering lamps, catching fragments of light like broken mirrors. She walked slowly, bag slung across her shoulder, hair damp against her cheek. Every step felt lighter, though her body carried the same weight. The difference was inside, something had shifted. Her wrist was bare. She glanced at it once, almost instinctively, but there was no cracked glass biting into her skin, no uneven ticking against her pulse. At first, the emptiness stung. Then, strangely, it soothed. She reached into her bag, pulling free her small notebook. Its pages were curled at the corners, ink smudged by sleepless nights. She flipped to the one she had circled again and again, the name of the company, the dream she had been told wasn't hers to touch. The name no longer scared her. Above her, clouds drifted apart, leaving streaks of silver moonlight on the wet ground. She stopped beneath it, tilting her face upward, eyes closed. Her father's voice echoed once more, not as a chain, but as a reminder: time bends for no one, but courage can slow it down. She smiled softly, barely there. Behind her, the station lights glowed faint, a reminder of the man with the photograph, of the watch that now lay in his hand instead of hers. She didn't know if their paths would cross again. Maybe they weren't meant to. Sometimes love is not romance, it's recognition, she whispered into the night, her breath clouding in the cool air. And she knew that what passed between them had not been possession, nor fate's cruel joke, but something quieter. A mirror held up in a crowded station, showing her what she had refused to see: she was no longer broken. She walked on. Past the lamplight, past the empty benches, past the tracks that would carry others into beginnings and farewells. The city waited, dark and uncertain, but no longer terrifying. Her reflection followed her in the puddles, rippling with each step. She didn't hide from it this time. At the edge of the street, she stopped, taking one last look over her shoulder. The station was small now, distant, but still glowing like a heartbeat in the night. And for the first time, she didn't feel the need to run back. Not every ending needs to be an answer. Some are simply doors you choose to walk through. And sometimes, what matters most is not what you take with you, but what you finally leave behind.